We are live with Janet Phelan, calling in live from Mexico with another story. Janet has to go through a lot more than perhaps you and I might think to get to do these stories, so we appreciate the effort that she puts in a public cafe. Has anybody ever commented on some of your stories after hearing you do your stories who happen to be standing by you? Has anybody ever commented locally?
Actually, just the other day, somebody did. Yeah, he was fluent in English and said, "You say such interesting things on the phone. Who are you talking to? Who are you? What do you do?" I said, "Oh, I say interesting things." So, yeah, sure.
Well, I was just.
Are people suing you? He said. I said, "No, nobody's suing me." So.
Well, you are dealing with the law issues, so I guess that is the common law thing to deal with. But anyway, so you are back here, and we have some things to talk about. An update on Cary-Andrew Crittenden, I think, would be looked forward to. And also, you were going to talk about the strange death of John Lang. And so we'll just turn it over to you to walk us through these things.
Right. We have a lot of issues now emerging in California. Of course, California is not unique to being what I'm calling now a constitution-free zone, because apparently the laws and constitutional imperatives, as well as the statutory codes in California, just don't apply. And we're going to see this very well in the situations we'll be talking about tonight. I do want to give an update on Cary-Andrew Crittenden, who has also done your show. As we know, he was being serially arrested and put into jail for what is tantamount to free speech issues. He was criticizing members of the Santa Clara County government, including police officers and assistant district attorneys and so forth, and he just kept being put in jail. Well, he was arrested again on Christmas Day, and this time we cannot really find out why. I have made numerous California Public Records Act requests and other contacts with an assistant district attorney named David Angel, who sends me the most polite and legally inaccurate responses. There is a governing case in California concerning the release of records, contemporaneous records, if a person is in custody. And the reasoning behind CUSAR is to basically protect us from secret arrests. Well, it does appear that ADA Angels just simply cannot wrap his head around CUSAR. And I get these, unfailingly polite responses in which he misstates the law, misstates CUSAR, and refuses to let me know why the heck is Cary in jail. What did they say he did? I mean, it's very simple. What did they say he did? Now, I made a request for police reports, understanding that would provide that sort of information. And according to CUSAR, there are parts of the police reports that would be disclosable, including the circumstances around the individual's arrest. But David Angel has dug his feet in and refuses to let us know. Now, I am getting letters from jail sent to a contact in Southern California and then scanned and forwarded to me, in which Cary is saying that they're trying to basically psychiatrize the situation. They're demanding that he speak with a psychiatrist, and we know very well where that goes. I think the Susan Lindauer situation was a very good, shall we say, warning for all of us. Susan recorded her story in a book called Extreme Prejudice. But basically what can happen is if a government doctor or someone who is attached to the system in unfortunate ways decides to declare Cary-Andrew Crittenden incompetent to stand trial, he'll never get a trial, and he will be held indefinitely without ever having his day in court. Because they'll need to treat him, of course. They'll need to drug him. They'll need, to do whatever sorts of forms of quote unquote psychiatric treatment that they find necessary, which can include drugging and worse. So the psychiatrization of dissent is a very clever way to deprive someone of their day in court and to detain an activist indefinitely.
Well, to this date now. As of now, we do not know anything about what's going on with him, other than that they want him to. They're trying to move it into the psychiatry area, which, with people who listen to this show, know the Paul Pantone story, which is where that's what he was in for 4.5 years, because a 45-minute interview deemed him unfit, and he was mandated to take medicine, which he refused, and he was refused medical attention unless he took his antipsychotic drugs. He refused, and he had a sprained ankle. I think it was a broken ankle, actually, if I recall the story, and they would not set it until he took his pills, which he didn't do. He didn't take the pills, and when he finally was released, they had, of course, re-break the ankle and fix it. And of course, you can't sue anybody. The judge and the people all retired, and the people after him is who let him out after being a lot of publicity, and it's ridiculous. I mean, the judges, I think, are the pinnacle of the most. The judges and the press, to me, are the two most guilty of this, because it seems like it's their job, one to blow the whistle on the stuff, and the other to make sure things are fair and proper. So, anyway, I did have up on the webpage the Extreme Prejudice book for people to extremeprejudiceusa.wordpress.com.
Well, Susan Lindauer is not the only one who has fallen prey to this mechanism, but certainly having had written her book and let us all know basically what happened to her, it certainly is a good source book for how the psychiatrization of dissent can be used to silence someone. I want to mention something else which needs to be brought to attention concerning medication. And as I have discussed in my own book, Exile, is right here, and also in other articles for New Eastern Outlook, there exists now the specter of the imposter pharmaceuticals.
Uh-oh. They have lost Janet. We lost you after the imposter pharmaceutical. It's froze, and now it's back.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's back. Well, the imposter pharmaceuticals are essentially heart attack drugs. And we understand that they are now being given to vulnerable individuals who are being incarcerated in nursing homes and possibly also in prisons. They are also being dispensed to political targets. And this is how it works. Someone falling under, one of those categories is dispensed a pill. It can be your friendly antipsychotic. It can be a antibiotic. It can be anything. And the person will take the pill thinking that it is actually medication when it is a death drug. And it will induce heart attacks or strokes. So anyone who is in the system and is being forcibly medicated needs to be aware that this is now at play and that this can actually end up happening to someone. So, it's not a happy report, but it's something that we have to bear in mind. I want to move on to another situation now that has happened in Northern California. Cary-Andrew Crittenden is being held in Santa Clara County Jail. And a situation just occurred recently in Fresno, California, which I think also needs our attention. An individual named John Lang, who was an activist in the area, began to make scary predictions on his Facebook page. He said that he thought the police were going to kill him. And his predictions over a period of a week or so were getting more and more insistent concerning this. And his last post, I believe, was on January 17th. It was a rather lengthy post talking about pedophile and corruption and so forth in local government. And he basically said that he thought he'd signed his death warrant by bringing these issues forward. 3 days later, John Lang was found dead in a Fresno house. He had been stabbed multiple times, and the house was burning down. I think a lot of people who saw John Lang's posts were dismissive of them. People were saying, "Oh, he's just alarmist." I think some of the cop block people got involved and thought, "Oh, he's just paranoid." But he predicted his death. He says, they're gonna come kill me. And so 3 days later, he's found dead under these very suspicious circumstances.
I do have a post, while you're talking, I do have the freethoughtproject.com has an article about this, and they actually have screen captures of these Facebook posts, and it does have a quote of that long post that you're talking about. And so that would be a good resource, I guess, for people to find, to look into this.
Another good place to find out about this is FresnoPeoplesMedia.com. Now, I went ahead and today I called the Fresno Police Department and I asked if I could speak with the public information officer. And I wanted to know specifically if Lang's death is being investigated as a homicide. It looks like that so far the police response to this, and I did check the Fresno Bee, which is the mainstream outlet there. The police are calling this suspicious. A person who says he's going to be dead, within days. 3 days later, he shows up with multiple stab wounds in a burning house. I believe that could be considered suspicious.
Yeah, I would say so.
So I wanted to know. Unfortunately, it would be the Fresno police that would be investigating this, and it was Lang's intention that it would be local law enforcement that would murder him. That would create, I think, a bit of a conflict of interest for the Fresno police. Nevertheless, I spoke with a Joe Gomez. I regret I did not get his position, whether he was lieutenant or sergeant or whatever, but he was a member of the police department, and he referred me to a head of homicide who I will be calling tomorrow, who's, I believe, a Sergeant Farah. And I tried to press Gomez a little bit. I said, this is sort of an unusual situation. And this is what Gomez told me. He said, "Oh no, this is not unusual at all." Now, I want this to sink in. Somebody is afraid for his life. He thinks the police are going to kill him. He makes a public post. 3 days later, he's found dead under these circumstances. And Joe Gomez says, this is not unusual. Then he went ahead and said, well, the black helicopter crowd is trying to make this something other than what it is. So I guess the black helicopter crowd, I'm not sure who's in the black helicopter crowd, maybe people who think that the police are getting a little, shall we say, trespassing their boundaries and who are concerned about infringement on their rights and their privacy rights. Would that be a good definition of the black helicopter crowd? Anyway, so Gomez is assuring me there's nothing strange. about someone thinking the police are going to kill him, and then 3 days later he's dead under these bizarre circumstances. And the problem is apparently people who think that the police are behaving too aggressively.
Well, it might not be anything big deal for them because they do this stuff. People get targeted and killed all the time. Oh no, it's not a big deal. This happens all the time. There might be a tongue-in-cheek in there somewhere.
I didn't hear that tongue-in-cheek. What I heard was him trying to convince a member of the media that there was nothing going on. I want to read, if I could, just a little bit from my book, Exile. When I ran into, shall we say, over-aggressive police officers. Is that okay if I read it?
Yeah, sure. Of course, yes. Oh, you're frozen again.
James?
Yeah, I hear you, but your video is. Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay.
Now we're all back ready, and we're all doing fine.
Okay. I may have read some of this before, but given that we are talking about a legal system that is aggressively targeting people who are speaking out, I think that it is appropriate here. So I'm going to read a couple pages from my book, Exile. I stopped at a supermarket for a cold drink. The security guard there greeted me. "I heard you're coming in," he said. I should have been startled, but I was beyond that. "You a cop?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, "I'm moonlighting." "Come on," he offered. "I'll go with you." We walked down the boulevard in silence. 2 blocks before the police department, he peeled off. "This is as far as I can take you," he said. I walked the remaining blocks alone. An officer was waiting in the lobby. He was tall, strapping, red-haired. "We're expecting you," he said. "What now?" I asked listlessly. "I'm ready to take you," he said, "but you'll have to be handcuffed." As the officer handcuffed me, I peered at his badge. Dawson. I was put in the back of a squad car. The windows were dark and I could not see where he was transporting me. "Where are we going?" I said. "To die," said Dawson. He seemed to straighten up and declared, "I am operating under the protection of the president." "Can I choose how?" I asked. He chuckled. "I don't want any violence," I said. I could just see myself smashed to a bloody heap by this big officer. "Negotiating my demise," I said. "Hopefully, a drug overdose would work." He chuckled again. "Sure thing," he said. So that's all I'm going to read right now. It goes on, the passage goes on to my drug overdose. And what concerns me, well, I want to get back to Lang's situation, and what concerns me and what has prompted some conversation and dialogue among some people that I know is that when the police decide to terminate someone, they've got a whole bag of tricks in their possession that they can use to make it look as if it was natural causes. They can do a drug overdose. Like a recent article of mine just published recently in New Eastern Outlook called "Falling from High Places." They can arrange for someone to, quote unquote, jump off a bridge, jump off or fall off a cliff, as Fox reporter Martin Burns, whose situation is discussed in the article, as what happened to him. There are numerous situations discussed in that article where people have fallen from high places to their death. People who happened to be either working on sensitive projects or working on exposing sensitive projects. So, and, you know, we can also, of course, have somebody dispensed through their local pharmacy, the imposter pharmaceutical, or they can flip their water valve, which we know that they're certainly capable of doing now in California. So there are a lot of ways that someone can be killed, and plausible deniability or a suspicious circumstances, which don't necessarily come back to taint local authorities, can be engineered. So for someone to end up dead in the circumstances that John Lang did, after he's screaming bloody, holy murder, he's going to be murdered, and then 3 days later he's dead, in these circumstances where, obviously somebody killed him. This is not usual. So I am very interested. I will be following through tomorrow and speaking with the head of homicide, Farah, tomorrow, and I'm very interested in what he may have to say about this, because the situation is a little more, shall we say, in your face than a lot of these deaths are. So.
Yes, that's
it's
sobering.
You still there, James?
Yeah, I'm here. It is sobering.
I've got a frozen picture here. I don't know if I got you or not.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I want to bring something else just quickly to our attention concerning California. It is the Department of Justice in California, which is now stonewalling Public Records Act requests having to do with a serial killer, guardian for-profit, Melody Scott. Melody Scott has been accused of lying on her paperwork for the Professional Fiduciaries Bureau. So she's being held again in administrative court hearings concerning her licensing at a time when there have been, to my knowledge, multiple reports have gone into the Department of Justice substantiating concerns that she has killed off her awards. So I contacted the California Department of Justice asking for the numbers. Simply, I wanted to know how many individuals have contacted the California AG making these sorts of allegations about Melody Scott. I personally know of several. So the California Department of Justice, in an apparent effort to protect their golden girl, serial killer of the elderly and disabled Melody Scott, simply will not respond to the Public Records Act requests. There is not the attempt, as with David Angel, to misstate the law and say why they cannot give you the information. They simply are just putting on their blinders and they're ignoring it. Melody Scott's, her administrative court hearings about this terrible thing she did by lying on her paperwork for the Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, hearings are coming up this week. We fully expect that Melody will be slapped on her knuckles and given her license so she can go her merry way and kill and rob more of California's vulnerable.
Well, I think this particular issue, as well as the child molestation and whatnot in government, I mean, these two are so hot that they're red hot. Anybody touches that, it's like the third rail. I mean, you can talk about Obamacare and whatever you want, but when you talk about these issues and you start having some information that really points to things on this topic in the government, you have to be stopped. I mean, this, because the public, as asleep and distracted as they are, were to find out about a major ring, either in the guardians bleeding and killing the elderly, or in child molestation systematically, and sex slaves and all that. I mean, the place, the people would just finally, I would hope anyway, just wouldn't take anymore.
Right. It really is the purpose of government to guard and protect the interests of we the people. And both of these issues, the obscene attack on the elderly and disabled through adult guardianships, as well as the taking of children for purposes of trafficking, as so well exemplified in this recent book by Keith Harmon Snow entitled The Worst Interests of the Child. These two issues run directly counter to what government, at the very least, is supposed to be letting people, have their family life uninterrupted. So I think you're right. These two issues are very red hot. Well, this pretty much concludes my segment for tonight. I want to thank you again for having me on. Next week, I hope to have a better report on what the Fresno Police Department is doing concerning what they're calling a suspicious circumstance, a man found dead with multiple stab wounds in a burning house. I do want to make a quick comment. I have seen in the past where local police departments, when they are dealing with a homicide or an attempted homicide that they don't want to deal with, they will term the circumstance suspicious. They will not call it a homicide or an attempted homicide. They will just term it suspicious. That way it doesn't fall into a specific category that mandates an investigation, and then it sort of just evaporates and goes away. So I will have a report next week concerning the horrific death of John Lang.
I've been watching forensic files as, sitting down, getting ready to go to bed. I'll watch one or so, maybe I'm retaped. And I like it because, they get the bad guy, or they free the guy who's been falsely accused. But I one thing that I'm aware of is all these towns that are having this, 10-year investigation. They're doing all this stuff. None of them are like Chicago, New York, L.A. And it's because if they can't find like the killer like down the street with a tag on it said, "Yeah, I killed him," they just move on to the next one, especially if you're not important. So on one hand, I'm encouraged somewhere that they go to these extremes and using all these techniques to find the criminals, but I realize that in the major metropolitan areas, it's just not happening. And if you're in a suspicious circumstance, they just move on. And if you are, even if you're gunned down in the street by 16 shots, 14 of which when you're already on the ground, or if you get 34 police chasing you and they put 127 rounds into you, that's okay. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, one of the interesting issues is that police are really being given a pass for murdering U.S. citizens. We're seeing it now repeatedly. I mean, the death of Kelly Thomas, again, I believe was Fullerton, California. He was a homeless individual who was beaten to death by police in full view of other individuals. Those police officers did not face any culpability for what they did. And we're seeing again and again and again where the police are essentially being given a pass to murder U.S. citizens. A recent article that I did had to do with some of the statements that the United States Department of Justice made in front of the United Nations during their Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Record of the U.S., I believe it was. And a statement was made that the Department of Justice had prosecuted, I believe, over 400 of these bad officers who'd done, bad things to people. And in fact, that number was a complete lie. The numbers of prosecutions in the time period that was basically under review could have been counted on the fingers of one hand. And the United States Department of Justice had the utter gall to get up in front of the world community and lie extravagantly. Now, these prosecutions can be tracked and they can be, one can count them. So when I contacted the United Nations, because I wanted to let them know, it was not only this instance, this particular instance of police murdering U.S. citizens, police behaving badly towards U.S. citizens, where the numbers were falsified. There were other issues having to do with the United States of America just blowing smoke like crazy up the collective rear ends of the international community. And I did finally get a response from somebody at the UN. And he said, "Well, this isn't my concern. Contact this person. Contact that person." Nobody wants to deal with this. The lies are basically set in stone, and the United Nations could care less. Apparently, if the U.S. is using this mechanism to review its own human rights record, which happens, I believe, every 4 or 5 years, it could care less if the U.S. is using it for its own propaganda purposes. Well, I think the Super Bowl is going on, and I, for one, do not want to watch it, but I imagine some of our listeners are, and hopefully...
I haven't watched it in years. In fact, I've done shows where I don't even know it's on or who's in it. Somebody in the chat room mentions it. But there was one thing about it that I thought was interesting, is they have put in cameras into the infrastructure of the stadium and into the posts on the field and all that. And they have a technology that allows them to, they freeze, like a guy's running and they freeze it and then they spin it around to see all different angles, like in the Matrix, for example, and all that kind of stuff. They've now put that in there so they could stop and they can go up and down angles and they can look around because they're all in sync and they could just switch to them. It's like all for a football game. I just think that's pretty wild. I mean, I like technology to do stuff like that because it's cool, but I have a hard time, and this is where, I don't know, I want to talk to people about this. I have a hard time, how can I, enjoy stuff like that, which is kind of cool, I mean, and then have these stories like you're talking about. I mean, how can I do that? I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to enjoy myself.
Amusing ourselves to death.
Yeah, I've actually...
Being abused to death, yep.
I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I mean, not that I want to try to learn how to do that. I don't understand how, I know people talk about karma and all this stuff, and they just simply, that's their karma. My karma is to have fun and not worry about it. I don't know. It doesn't sound right, but, who knows. But I do appreciate you coming with these stories. They're very important and need to be disseminated. I will be posting this as I do on YouTube. And you could share that freely. You can download it. You do it. But anybody who's watching, get it out there. Facebook it around and all that other stuff to get the information out there. Pass it to some of these other websites who are whistleblowers. And if there are people out there who are whistleblowing and would like to talk about it, of course, I'm always open to having those people on the show.
Thank you so much, James.
All righty. Thank you, Janet Phelan.
Have a great week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.